You've been walking past liquid gold your entire life. That random tree in your backyard? It might produce a syrup so rare, restaurants pay $300 a gallon for it, and you've probably never even heard its name. Black walnut trees grow in 32 states across America. That means millions of people walk past potential syrup money every single day without knowing it. Here's what makes this stuff special. The sap has about 2% sugar, same as maple. But the flavor, completely different. We're talking bold, nutty, with this butterscotch thing happening in the background. Chefs absolutely lose their minds over it. Now for the math that'll make you sweat. You need 40 gallons of sap to get 1 gallon of syrup. 40. That's basically emptying a small swimming pool to fill a milk jug. Worth it though. At farmers markets, black walnut syrup sells for 20 to 30 bucks a pint. Nearly double what regular maple goes for. Your neighbor's been complaining about that messy walnut tree for years. Meanwhile, you could be sitting on a small fortune. And the weird part is, these trees are actually kind of jerks. They produce something called juglone, a chemical that straight up murders tomatoes and other plants nearby. Your garden hates this tree, but that same compound creates these complex tannic undertones in the syrup that fancy restaurants can't get enough of. Tapping season runs January through March, depending on where you live. You need that freeze-thaw cycle, same as maple. So you've got a tree that poisons its neighbors, demands 40 gallons of work, and somehow produces liquid gold. But black walnut isn't even the most labor-intensive syrup out there, not even close. Beech trees. You've seen them 1,000 times and never thought twice about it. That smooth gray bark that looks like elephant skin? Dead giveaway. These things blanket the entire eastern United States, from Maine all the way down to Florida. Gorgeous trees, completely ignored by syrup makers. Here's why most people skip them. The sugar content is pathetic. We're talking 0.5 to 0.9%. Maple sits around 2 to 3%. Do the math, and you'll want to cry. You need 80 to 100 gallons of sap for 1 gallon of syrup. That's basically emptying a hot tub into a coffee mug. But the flavor? Worth every drop. This stuff tastes like honey had a baby with caramel. Seriously, high-end restaurants don't pour it on pancakes. They use tiny drizzles as finishing touches on dishes that cost more than my first car. And get this, Europeans have been making beech syrup for centuries. Germany, Denmark, they figured this out ages ago. Meanwhile, fewer than a dozen American producers even bother selling it commercially. We're literally decades behind on our own trees. One thing working in your favor, though, beech trees are loners in a good way. They don't need other trees to pollinate them, so they grow in thick, pure stands. One property could have 30, 40 tappable trees clustered together. The catch? Your window is tiny, maybe 2 to 3 weeks before the flavor goes bitter. Speaking of trees that barely exist anymore, butternut trees, white walnuts, whatever you call them, you might be looking at a ghost. Back in the 1960s, a fungal disease called butternut canker showed up uninvited. It spread like wildfire. 80% of butternut trees? Gone. Just wiped off the American landscape within a few decades. So, if you've got a healthy one growing on your property, congratulations. You own something rarer than most people realize. Some states actually list these trees as endangered now. But here's where it gets interesting for syrup makers. Butternut sap runs around 2 to 3% sugar. That's maple territory. You're looking at 35 to 45 gallons per gallon of finished syrup. Way more manageable than that beech nightmare we just talked about. The flavor, though? Completely different animal. Lighter, more delicate, almost vanilla-ish. This stuff belongs drizzled over ice cream or swirled into cake batter. It doesn't punch you in the face like black walnut does. And get this, old farmsteads are your best hunting grounds. Why? Because butternut wood carves like butter. Early American furniture makers loved it, so farmers kept these trees around. Then the farms got abandoned. But the trees, some survived in forgotten corners, just hanging on. One more thing worth knowing. If you tap a butternut correctly, you won't hurt it. Actually, some citizen science programs want you to report healthy trees. You'd be helping researchers track what's left of the population. I'll be honest, I thought these health rings were a scam. I bought one half expecting to send it back. But 3 months later, it hasn't left my finger. And it does way more than I expected. Sleep, activity, heart rate, recovery, and stress, all from one little ring. The thing that helped me most? I realized my afternoon coffee was quietly wrecking my sleep. One small change, cutting it off after lunch, and within a week, I was sleeping like a rock. Now here's why I'm telling you this. Right now the ring's 63% off, just $60 if you grab it through the link in the description or scan the QR code on screen. There's a 90-day money-back guarantee if it's not for you, but I'm keeping mine. Now, speaking of big trees hiding in plain sight, American sycamores, the biggest deciduous trees on the continent, trunks wider than pickup trucks. You've seen them 1,000 times along rivers and creeks, that white patchy bark peeling off like the tree's got a sunburn problem. And nobody taps them. Seriously, almost nobody, which is wild when you think about it. These giants grow in 40 states. 40. They're not hiding. They're not rare. They're just standing there along every riverbank in America, completely ignored by syrup makers. Here's the thing. Sycamore sap runs about 1 to 1.5% sugar. Not amazing, but not terrible either. You're looking at 50 to 60 gallons per gallon of finished syrup. That puts it right between maple and beech territory. The flavor? Butterscotch meets honey. Lighter than maple. Less aggressive. The kind of thing you'd drizzle on yogurt without overpowering everything else in the bowl. And get this. Native Americans were tapping sycamores as sweeteners centuries ago. Then Europeans showed up, got obsessed with maple, and that knowledge just vanished. Poof. Gone for generations. But here's what really gets me excited. Sycamores start flowing early, like January, early in southern states. While maple tappers are still waiting around for temperatures to cooperate, sycamore folks are already collecting sap and getting a head start on the season. So you've got the biggest trees, in the most states, that everyone drives past without a second glance. Now, what if I told you the next syrup doesn't come from sap at all? Okay, so here's where things get weird. Hickory syrup is a total fraud. I mean that in the best way possible. You're not tapping anything. There's no sap involved. Zero. What you're doing is boiling bark, specifically shagbark hickory bark. Those long curly strips that peel off the trunk like the trees shedding a winter coat. You grab that bark, toss it in a pot of water, simmer it for hours, then add sugar. That's it. The bark releases all these smoky, complex flavors into the liquid. Strain it out, reduce it down. Boom. Hickory syrup. And honestly, it tastes like someone bottled a campfire and made it delicious. We're talking smoky, a little bitter, almost savory instead of sweet. This stuff doesn't go on pancakes. It goes on pork chops, in bourbon cocktails, glazed over ribs. The flavor comes from tannins, same compounds that make tea astringent and red wine dry, except here they're doing something magical with that hickory essence. Now here's the beautiful part. Those bark strips? They fall off naturally. Shagbark hickories just shed, constantly. Most homeowners rake them up and throw them away, literally tossing future syrup into garbage bags every fall. Appalachian folks figured this out generations ago. Small producers down there sell 8-ounce bottles for $15. And it's spreading. You probably walked past a shagbark hickory this week without knowing it. But what happens when you combine tree syrup with something bees obsess over? Basswood trees have an identity crisis. Beekeepers call them the holy grail. Those creamy white flowers bloom in early summer, and bees go absolutely insane for them. Basswood honey is legendary. Light, delicate, sells for premium prices. But here's what the beekeepers don't mention. That same tree? Totally tappable. The sap runs around 1% sugar. Not amazing, not terrible. You're looking at 60 to 80 gallons for 1 gallon of syrup. That's a commitment. Like deciding to hand wash your car every single day for a month. Worth it though, because basswood syrup tastes like nothing else. Floral, almost perfumed. It's like someone took honey, made it lighter, then whispered the memory of flowers into it. Sounds ridiculous, tastes incredible. And these trees are everywhere. Cities planted them along streets for decades because they grow fast and handle pollution like champs. That shady boulevard near your dentist's office? Probably basswood. Native Americans figured out 100 uses for these trees. The inner bark became emergency food during tough winters. The outer bark got twisted into rope strong enough to tie canoes together. But syrup production? That seems to be something modern foragers rediscovered. The timing works out beautifully too. Basswood sap flows alongside maple season, but wraps up a bit earlier. Some producers mix the two saps together during boiling. Creates this hybrid flavor that's part traditional, part something completely new. Speaking of completely new, what happens when a tree grows thorns longer than your finger? Honey locust trees look like they want to hurt you. Because they do. Wild ones grow thorns up to 8 inches long, not just on branches. On the trunk. The entire tree becomes a medieval weapon. You could impale a watermelon on one of these things. But here's the twist. Those terrifying thorns guard something genuinely sweet. Forget the sap. With honey locust, you're after the pods. Long, twisted, leathery brown pods that drop by the hundreds every fall. Inside that pod? Pulp, containing up to 30% sugar. That's insane. Maple sap wishes it could dream that high. The process is different too. You boil the pods, strain out the fibrous stuff, then reduce what's left into this dark, molasses-style syrup. Tastes earthy, rich, almost like brown sugar decided to become a liquid. Cherokee tribes figured this out centuries ago. They fermented the pods into beer, used the sweet pulp before refined sugar existed. Europeans showed up and basically forgot all this knowledge. Now here's the beautiful irony. Cities planted thornless honey locusts everywhere because they tolerate garbage soil, drought, and pollution. Check any parking lot. Highway median. That sketchy lot behind the strip mall. Probably honey locust. Every autumn, property owners curse these pods. Rake them up, throw them away. Mow right over them. Meanwhile, each mature tree drops enough pods for several quarts of free syrup. Speaking of free sweeteners most people ignore, what if the most expensive syrup in America came from trees growing in your neighbor's yard? Birch syrup costs more than some people spend on steak dinners. We're talking $40 to $80 per pint. Wholesale. Why so expensive? Because birch trees hate giving up their sweetness. You need somewhere between 100 and 150 gallons of sap to make a single gallon of syrup. That's not a typo. 150 gallons. Maple only needs 40. Birch basically makes you beg for it. And the flavor? Nothing like maple. Not even close. Birch syrup tastes savory. Complex. People describe it as molasses mixed with wild berries and a weird hint of wintergreen. First time I tried it, I genuinely didn't know if I liked it. Took 3 more tastes before my brain figured out what was happening. Alaska dominates production because paper birch and yellow birch grow everywhere up there. Forests packed with them. But here's what kills me. White and yellow birch trees grow all across the northern United States too. Vermont, Michigan, Minnesota, Wisconsin. Almost nobody taps them. Gets worse. Birch sap spoils faster than milk left in a hot car. We're talking 24 to 48 hours before it goes bad. No refrigeration? You just collected expensive compost. That's why casual hobbyists avoid birch. The math doesn't work unless you're serious. Really serious. But the people who figure it out? They're selling syrup at prices that make maple producers jealous. Now, what if the most annoying trees in your neighborhood could actually pay you back? Norway maple. You've probably seen it. Might even have one in your yard right now. Here's the thing nobody talks about. This tree is an invasive nightmare. It spreads faster than gossip at a family reunion, choking out native species across the entire Northeast. Ecologists hate it. But it makes syrup. Good syrup, actually. Sugar content runs about the same as native maples. Same basic process, same results. The tree that's destroying your local ecosystem can literally pay rent. Gets weirder. Ever heard of Tree of Heaven? The tree that grows through sidewalks and abandoned lots, basically anywhere you don't want it? Some foragers have tapped it. The syrup tastes bitter and strange. Not exactly pancake material. But people are trying. Box elder sits in a similar category. Technically a maple, but everyone treats it like a weed. Nobody plants it on purpose. Yet the sap works. Makes decent syrup with slightly less sugar than the fancy maples. English walnuts produce something milder than black walnut. More familiar nutty taste, less aggressive. This whole category feels like revenge, honestly. Trees that spent decades annoying homeowners, dropping helicopter seeds everywhere, cracking foundations. Now they're useful. The commercial market barely exists yet. We're talking backyard experimenters, curious foragers, people who looked at a problem tree and thought, what if? Tapping invasives doesn't hurt native ecosystems. If anything, it gives landowners a reason to actually deal with these things. So what happens when you stop using tree sap altogether and start using something else entirely? All right, here's where things get weird. And honestly, way more fun. Take any tree syrup we've talked about, birch, walnut, sycamore, whatever. Now imagine adding dried hibiscus flowers to it. The syrup turns bright red, like traffic light red. The hibiscus releases these compounds called anthocyanins that completely transform the color while adding this tart, almost cranberry-like punch. It's basically syrup wearing a party dress. But wait, throw in some dried chili peppers. Now you've got something special. The sweetness hits first, then about 5 seconds later the heat creeps in. Perfect for glazing ribs. Even better in a spicy margarita. Small producers have turned this into a whole cottage industry. Lavender maple, cardamom birch, smoked walnut with a hint of vanilla. The combinations are endless. Here's the beautiful part. Remember that basswood syrup that barely seems worth the effort? Infuse it with rosemary and suddenly you've got a $25 bottle of liquid gold. That labor-intensive beech syrup? Add some orange peel and it's gourmet finishing oil. The infusion process works with literally any tree syrup. Even your invasive species experiments can become premium products. And bonus? Many additions like hibiscus and chilies contain natural antimicrobial compounds. Your fancy infused syrup actually lasts longer than the plain stuff. So there you have it. 10 tree syrups hiding in plain sight across America. Your backyard might literally be sitting on liquid gold. Grab a drill, find a tree, see what happens.